All right. Well, we have been talking about how to engage girls in STEM, which is the panel we're going to be presenting in February. And we're talking with different members of the panel. And I'm talking tonight with Mike Lord, although it's morning for him and it's night for me. But Mike and I are, as I've been saying to Mike for a while now, we're basically the two old dogs in the room when it comes to women in the engineering fields and in the technology fields. Um, I'm one of the trailblazers in the 80s. And Mike, where were you in the 80s and how were where was your path in the 70s, 80s? Where were you at?
Yeah, well, I go back a couple of years earlier. I'm a little different, I guess, in regards to I started my I come from a trade background. I am what you would call a straight A student, but for some reason, school wasn't for me. So I left in 79, 74, and I joined in those days what we call the government, the railways division, as an apprentice. And they had just built a brand new facility, massive training center, 1,000 apprentices, and there was 999 males and one female. The first female apprentice, literally in Australia, was in 1975. I still don't know. Michelle Jones, I never worked with her. She was an electrician. I started off as actually, I started off as a carriage builder, but they dropped that because trains were no longer going to be made out of timber, and they
Right.
split that, and I became a cabinet maker, carpenter by trade. So yeah, so going back to the 70s, but the early 80s saw me migrate from my trade to where I actually am. I started with a company called Trakka. We're a manufacturer of motorhomes, RVs, and I have been there ever since. So from that, my career went from being a builder of vehicles to a designer and engineer of our product, and that's how I spent my 80s and 90s, 2000s, and who knows from there.
Right. So early 70s, one woman, electrical, love it,
Yep.
electrician. Um, when you in your company right now where you're working, what is how many women are working in your company right now?
So if I just jump back quickly to the first part
Yeah.
of that, yeah, one woman in 1975. By the time I finished, I think there was five or six female apprentices. So they did expand a little bit. Where I am now, we're a manufacturer. We've probably got 30 guys on the workshop floor.
Hmm.
I think there's currently one female working down in the workshop. We've had over the years, we've had really for the last 10 years, we've had probably always two or three always working in the factory floor and in the trades. Um, and I can, these days they're just treated, I hate to say the word, as one of the boys. We don't have any issues. There's no, I guess, what you would have faced certainly in the 80s. There's no real harassment, certainly no sexual harassment. There's no bullying of her. The guys literally, I think these days just accept them, and it's great to see they are just another person. I think part of this whole discussion, which are not concerns me, but it's one of the parts which I wish we weren't talking about. I wish this wasn't a gender-based discussion.
I was in high school, right? Late
Mhm.
70s, early 80s, graduated in 82. My first experience in a trade class or a shop class or an industrial arts class, however you want to put it, um, was my senior year of high school. And I took drafting. Um, Not because I looked at the schedule and said, "Ooh, this would be cool." It was me being flip with my guidance counselor at the end of my junior year who told me I needed one more elective. And I looked at him and said, "Put me in drafting for all I care." And I left. And that's exactly what he did. And that's why I ended up in the drafting class. Um, Girls didn't take classes like that. There were very few that did. I see it now, even in my classroom. I have girls that come in. I have a good mix of girls to boys in sixth grade, although it's still boy heavy, and I really don't know why. Other than I think it's because when the girls are making their course selections, it's not something that they consider. What is technology education? I mean, what is intro to tech? What is this? And I think part of the issue there is the counselors sometimes don't have the right way to answer the questions. I know that my numbers were better with girls when I would go out to the schools. There was a couple of years where the principal and I we would go out to the different schools, and we would have a whole discussion and meet with the kids, the fifth grade classes, and talk with them about my program and the aerospace program, and the two different programs that we were building at our school, and that helped. Um, I think
And I think that's
you
yeah, I
know,
think that's one of the many parts of I think this whole discussion about
yeah,
women and girls in STEM in general. Um, we all know the reports, we all see it where it says, exposure at a younger age. But the question, then becomes, why does it still not continue? Is it just not something that appeals to them? And
I
it's
don't.
it's the strange thing. The exposure should be there, and obviously you see it far more than I
Well,
do.
I see it because I'm a woman, right? And I'm working, like, I have one class right now, okay? Eighth grade class. It's a very small class. There are 10 kids in this class, one girl. And the boys don't mess with her because she hangs tough. She's very talented. She's extremely intelligent. And she runs circles around him most of the time. And so she just looks at him, and she's this cute little teeny tiny petite, and she's just absolutely adorable. And I've had her since sixth grade, and she's always been one that has been, excel, 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 excel. She had, whatever her goal is, that's what she did. But matter of fact, me and my infinite wisdom decided to do a project this year. I had them reverse engineer graham crackers and pieces to make a gingerbread house. We
Nice.
created the parts, we created a common file, and they had them, and they learned how to do assemblies. And it was just coincident and, mates, because there wasn't anything really major other than sticking crackers together. And, but I taught them some basic, mate, how do you assemble? And then the ones that got all assembled, we did some 2D drawing stuff, which I don't teach, but with some of them, I went that far further with them. But of all the gingerbread houses that were built, hers by far was absolutely blew me right out of the water. She kept it true to form. She, painstakingly, just took the time, and she worked on it for 4 days. And the guys in the class were like, how come hers looks so good? And I'm like, she was patient. She took her time. She was concerned about the quality of the work. These are all things that make up a good engineer, a good technician, a good designer, anyone who's in the workforce. All of those things are things that are important. And she used those skills.
I
You
think that's one of
decided you wanted just to have a party and just where, and that's one thing I noticed with a lot of the guys in my classes. They're they want to get through it really fast. They tend to take a shortcut that maybe come back and bite them in the butt later. And then, so that kind of affects the quality of the finished product, where most of the girls I have take a little bit more time. They pay more attention to looking at what they're expected to do, following the direction. Like I'll say, hey, don't forget, you need to make it, you know, The material on this has to be 1060 alloy. Don't forget it, and it'll even be written, like typed big U letters. This is the material. And then, you know, oh, I didn't know what material it was. And it's like written in like 6 places, it's like, okay, go back and look. So,
I think that we that's I mean, we know that again, this is what I was saying before about this being a gender
yeah,
discussion. I think we know that women have the
mhm,
ability. We know that they have the skills, and as you pointed out, they have a lot more than certainly young males have. They have that, much more grown up, much more
yeah,
matured, much earlier, and have that ability, and much more patience. And so
yeah.
we know it's not a skill issue. We know it's not an education. We know it's not an intelligence issue.
No,
So we
it's
know
not.
it's all the things we know it's not.
Mhm.
The question is
How do
still,
we fix it? Yeah.
why? Why is this a long-term issue? Because we know that the figures haven't changed in our lifetime.
Not
We
in
know
mine.
the growth rate of women in engineering is glacial.
Mhm.
It's a quarter to half a percent for the last 20 to 30 years.
And it and
It's
it's not just
incredible.
it's not just the engineering, it's the technology piece too. I mean, I was talking to my girlfriend a few years ago. The science program in my county decided to do these what they called STEAM programs, which was science, technology, engineering, arts, and math, right? And they put small groups of the high performing students, high academic performing students, and they put these into 11 different schools. My school happened to have been one of them. And they had the science and the math teachers, and they got Lego Mindstorms. And the science and math teachers were teaching the science and the math. And then they were interweaving the Legos and the robotic stuff into the curriculum. But they were, struggling because, again, their science teacher, math teacher. And don't get me wrong, science teachers, math teachers, they can teach tech ed, but they have to have the understanding of it and know what tech ed is and what those things are, what is the process, and a lot of them don't. You train them? Yes, but again, that requires training them properly so they know what to do. So I went up to the principal at the time, Dr. Blackburn, who really became basically one of the best principals I've ever worked for. And her and I were the ones that developed a lot of stuff that happened at our school. And I walked into her office, and this was after a training, and she was telling all the elective teachers that we had to teach more reading across the curriculum. And I looked right at her and I says, that's not me. I teach science and math, and I reinforce science and math across the curriculum. I'll do the reading because we all have to read, but me, I focus more on focus on the science and math because technology needs science and math. Without it, it doesn't exist. So she said, okay. And then I walked into her office. I said, you could the science people that set this program up were wrong. She said, what do you mean? I says, well, I said, if they were smart, they would have put somebody like me teaching the T in the E and let the science and math people do their thing and put me in the middle connecting the pieces together. A true cross curriculum, which is really what it should be. She says, I like the way you think. What do you think? You think we could do this next fall? I said, sure. And I says, I don't care how many kids you give me, I'll take them all. And so the following year, I became the core academic um, elective. Any kid who was in that program had to have me. They didn't have a choice. They had to. And here's the thing.
I locked them up.
Here's the thing. Kids that would never have taken my class took my class. Young girls who had never taken my class all of a sudden now were in my class. Then they were being exposed and saying, oh, wow, I could do that. I could do this. Wait a minute. How did you do that? And then all of a sudden, I had the girls coming in and feeding in, and I had all of the higher academic kids feeding in. So I had this, like, the most amazing little young minds that you can imagine in one room. And they had an experiment the year before, and I wasn't part of it. They decided they were going to separate it. So one classroom was all the boys and one was all the girls. And they separated it, boys and girls. When I came in, it was when they finally mixed them back together. But for the first 2 years, they kept them separate because they felt that it would be better for the girls to be separated from the boys so they wouldn't feel that they could be more open. And if they made mistakes, they wouldn't feel exposed. And that was one of their thought processes why we would do it that way. And I could see some of it with some of the girls. Yes, I could see that. But I also realized that in the real world, they're not going to be separated, men and female. And that's only creating this division that we're trying to close. And here you're opening it. And now, wait a minute, and it's not going to
Oh,
close because you've separated. So when we put them back together and they were working, it became clear that it was good. The issue sometimes was the boys and the maturity level of the boys, where the girls are, we all know this, girls at the age group I'm teaching are much more mature than the boys that I'm teaching. Um, Heck, boys in the
I think
early
that goes for
20s,
all. I think that goes for all of life, actually.
right? But most guys in their early 20s, they still haven't, developed that, you know, this is bad. I could end up dead if I do this. Where most girls by this point have said, if you do this, you might not survive. So I think we have it. I think guys are more willing to go out there and put it out on the edge because they don't have as much fear. I think sometimes we as women, we're fearless, but sometimes we also stop and take stock of, okay, I'm going to be fearless. What are the consequences of doing this? Um, I think closing and bringing more women in, we've done great with programs like First Robotics, Lego League, which works with the Mindstorms, and other programs like after STEM summer camps and things like that. They're all great, but they introduce heavy science, heavy math. Well, girls are going to gravitate to the science because they could go into the biofields, the genetics. They could go into all of those high-tech science fields, even into medicine and nursing, which all relate into that science area. And then when they get into robotics and they do the coding and stuff, they're getting all the math. So if we look at those studies, the studies that you had and the studies I looked at, science and math side of STEM are doing great. They've got double-digit numbers. They're growing. They don't have a problem. Where tech, which falls technology, and this is the thing, my kids come into my room and say, "Oh, we're going to use technology. We're going to use computers." I'm like, that's not all technology is. It's not just computers. It's the pencil you're writing with. It's the desk you're sitting at. It's the car you drive every day. Your parents take you places, and they're like, "It is." So I think we don't, the girls that go into those fields, right? Welding, electrical, construction, they have had to have somewhere along the line someone show them, or they've grown up in a family where it is prevalent in their family and they've already been exposed. So you're right. Is exposure part of part of it? Yes, we do have to expose. But I think the other part is that we put so much emphasis on the S and the M that we forget the T and the E are just as important. And the
Yeah.
T and the E tend to have the dirty jobs.
Well, I think that's one of the that's where the gap, or that's where the issue is partly in the education. As you say, certainly the science have no issues at all. I think things like veterinary science have a far greater number of women in it. It's the engineering, and it's an accepted that is engineering, are women not drawn to it because is it a dirty job, or is it just not shown that the whole process of engineering, and we know that the whole engineering field, ranges from medical at one end to sewage at the other. You
Right.
can't, they're all engineering, and that's where the trick is. Is it just is it competition? Is it just females are just drawn to a the science side of things because it's maybe it's the more intellectual side of things that they see, or is it the nurturing side of women which seem to come out and bring them in to
Mhm.
say, well, not am I'm helping humanity by being able to look into to the medical side or the biology side. Um, so is it a process that we're talking gender because talking gender because of basically genetics? Are women, just genetically more nurturing? We talk about males in their 20s just not maturing, and by that time, women have made a choice. They've grown up, they've made a choice, and they're already made those life choices where men at
I don't
times
know.
just
I don't know
fall
about
into
that.
things.
I don't know about that. I was a little bit of a hot mess, trying to figure out what I wanted to do. Um, um, I think not only is it women, but it's even the minority. I mean, it's not just a man, woman, girl, boy. It is. There's a whole minority. I mean, and I consider women part of that minority that we're not exposed to it. We're not given the opportunities. If we are given the opportunities, where are those mentors that look like us, that sound like us, that are saying, "Hey, this is what you need to do. How can I, this is how you could do this." And I think we as a whole need more women and people who are in those roles who are willing to say, "Hey, you want to do this? Great. Let me be someone that you can reach out to and talk to when you get into that spot in the workplace where you have the guy who is an absolute creep, who doesn't seem to understand the word no, or doesn't understand that no, this is my job, this is what I'm going to do, and I'm not doing this because you feel it's my place for me to do this." And I think Danny put it really well when I talked to her about how her first job, she was fortunate because there was a woman who she worked under, who she worked with, and she had a strong female there working with her. My case wasn't the case with me. With me, I was always one of the guys. And I mean, I grew up, my grandparents, I worked with my grandfather building and working on the fairgrounds that they owned. So I wasn't afraid of hard work. It was instilled in me from a very young age. You got to work hard, you got to do your job, stay focused, do what you need to do to be successful. So, was I good in math? No, I was horrible in math. Oh my God. I tell my students all the time, me and math are mortal enemies. Um, I was not your your math kid. Me and really, I mean, the book flying across the room, hitting the wall, sliding down the wall, my father screaming in the background, "How can you not understand this?" And to me, it was just a bunch of wild numbers. But I also blame that sometimes on me having teachers in elementary school who didn't really like math either, who taught more reading, history, science. So a lot of the teachers I had didn't do a lot of math because, well, they didn't like math themselves. So when I finally did get a math teacher who actually knew how to teach math and who actually was able to teach me the concepts, I was a senior in high school.
Yeah, but I think, yeah, but I guess, that's changed a lot these days too. I think the
And I think
education in
and it
regards to
has
things like
because
maths.
that doesn't happen like that anymore because the teachers now have to have, they have to teach now elementary school, it's totally different. But when I was back then, there was no, it was like, whatever. But I think that's the other thing too. And I think sometimes girls feel, and I see it with my girls, oh, this is math. This is going to be too hard. And I'm like, okay, if I can do it, you can do it. And that's what I say to them. You don't have to be afraid of it. And I think that's one of the other things. We have to be able to let them fail, but we also have to be there to pick them up and have them be able to ask the questions, why did this not work? Why did it not work? What can I do to fix it? And not give them the answer, but to help them discuss it and to find the answer on their own. And I think part of engineering and part of tech is to be able to problem solve. What is the problem you're looking at? How do we solve that problem? And I think one of the biggest things that we don't teach is, how do you identify a problem? How is that problem? Why is that problem there? What can I do to fix that problem? And I think if we did more of that, I mean, that shows that humanity, that shows that nurturing and caring, even if it's fixing a gear train and there's a gear that's not working. It's still, okay, this is for this machine that's going to, dispense pills or whatever. I think we have to start showing them different ways of looking at things. And I think one of the biggest successes I have with the girls is showing them, okay, here's a problem, guys. Let's figure it out. How do we solve this problem? Where do we go from here? And I think when the girls are getting the answers and the guys are kind of willy-nilly, and all of a sudden the girls are coming up with the answers and they're being successful, and you're saying, hey, that's great. Those girls go on. Now, we sent out a survey that I sent out to my former students. I've been teaching at the same school for 27 years. I sent out a survey to some of my students I'm still in contact with, which is a few, and they've sent it out to their friends. And the one big interesting thing almost every single one of them said was, yes, I inspired them. Okay. But the girls that I inspired, 90% of them were on that track on a STEM path anyway, that they were going to continue.
I think that's one of
Of those, I have a couple engineers. I have a young lady who's a doctor. So I have quite a few that have gone on and gone on. But one of the ones that's the engineer who's now working for Blue Origins. For her, she constantly went from one. She went to a couple different jobs, did a couple different jobs for a couple different companies, and finding that respect and finding that place that they felt comfortable. That's a big thing. And I don't care if you're a man, I don't care if you're a woman, if you are not in a work environment that makes you feel supported or makes you feel like you are part of the team and is going to give you some place to grow and become better at what you are, it's very hard to stay. And I think one of the reasons we have that issue is we don't have enough support, enough mentorship. We don't have those little things in place to keep someone who is fighting against the norm.
Yeah, I think there's a
You know
couple
what
of things. I
I'm
think,
saying?
certainly with the education side of things, I think one of the issues really across the board with education, and this is where the STEM programs do step in.
Yeah.
But basically, education and schooling doesn't look at the future. It doesn't look at, teaching you for a career, because basically you're going to get an education to really, it's such a very small part of your overall life. but
right,
it's not education based on, you know, aiming you to a future career.
right.
I have the odd, we've employed the odd, university student coming out from industrial design. We employ them, and basically the case of saying, well, yeah, you bring some good skills with you, but now I have to re-educate you about manufacturing. This is a workshop environment. This is what
Right.
you need to learn. It's all very nice to learn the theory, but now I have to educate you into what I would call a real life experience. And it's the same thing as you say about finding a career which suits you. And again, it's the same thing, both all genders really. You've got to find and a lot of us fall into those type careers where you know, find a job and it might be, it might be what you're doing, or it might be,
Be what you love.
what you're not doing.
Right.
Sometimes you do. You have to sometimes shop around, and when you find the right place, you know it's the right place. And most of us, I would say a vast majority of people fall into their careers because they've found a job which suits them, and you've been able to grow inside that business. So you're not just your skills base, but what you're learning and what you're bringing in, and the challenges that you face allow you to grow as a person, as an engineer. And I
Right.
think that's a big difference. And a lot of people, start off in one career and they head in a whole other direction because that they found the right employer, they've found um, the right industry, the right trade. They've found something where, they want to get out of bed every morning and go to work, and it may be something, and again, so I think that's the other issue, where you start and where you finish your life or your career can always be two different things. And again, that's again that first part. How do you get those people into the right businesses to start with before you can
I
even keep them?
and I think it's exposure. And now, like with me, our county and a lot of the counties now, they have what they call career academies, and the students get their general learning, but when they come to their elective classes, they're actually going to a teacher like me who is specialized in training certain things. Construction academies are really big right now in my academy because of all the buildings. So, of course, teaching the kids how to swing a hammer and how to frame a house and how to actually work. And we have construction companies that actually come out and work, show the kids, and they bring the kids out. And so they're getting exposure. Um, we're seeing more and more of a push now. And I know in the United States, I don't know about in Australia, but there is a big shift of you don't need to go to college for 4 years. You don't need that debt. You can go to a 2-year trade school or a community college that offers it. Get your 2-year degree, get a job, get out there as an apprentice, get in the workforce and work. And we're seeing a big shift and turn that way. Matter of fact, the county next to ours, they're building a trade high school, and it's going to be all different trades, and it's you know 9th through 12th grade, and with the plan of those kids when they graduate are going into a apprenticeship program, a union, or if they need to go on to more a tech school or a college, then they go. And I think we have to admit that every kid isn't going to go to college. Let's face
No,
it.
I think
And
we
I
see the
think
same. I mean,
right,
in my era, the era before us, I mean, trades were treated as a skill. I mean,
right,
coming to my kids' generation, it was like every kid has to go to university,
right,
and there's more people with degrees in something who are still working their local. Their local business, their local industry, because, one, they went to university because it was expected that. And I think, the under appreciation of trades um, has led to skills all around the world. Australia is no different. We don't have a car industry in Australia anymore. We stopped building vehicles back in the mid 2000s, and because you know and so we've lost all that. We've lost a refrigeration industry in Australia, all those things, and the whole negative of that is that you lose a skill base. You lose,
And
you lose an engineering skill base. You lose, an assembly knowledge of those
Mhm.
industries,
And
and
you and that's
Australia is no different. It's exactly the same. We have huge skill shortages. We have
Mhm.
to have migration in regards to being able to fill the gaps in some of those industries. So, um, because we no longer have those skills, and it's
Right.
it's it's a terrible shame that any country, and the US, certainly Australia is the same, is that we're no longer fully independent. At one stage, that apart from a few things, Australia was basically a very much independent country. We still have some very, very good skills. We're very much a specialist niche manufacturer
Right.
these days. But we still have general manufacturing. But a lot of those skills have all gone because, you know, the world economy. And
Well,
don't get me wrong, I'm
it's
a
not just
huge supporter of that.
I'm a
But
we've got to the point where the skill gap is so huge. I don't know if I mean, they're trying to close it, but I don't see how they're going to close it. And again, it comes down to who's training them, right? I'm the
well,
old dog in the room. Okay. I was
well,
classically trained. My first 2 years were my associate's degree is in machine design. And I learned machine design and I learned on boards with T squares and compasses and drafting machines. I didn't have a computer. We didn't have CAD at the program I was at. We were required to take a manufacturing process class. I learned how to run a Bridgeport mill. I learned how to run um, a screw machine. I learned how to run all of the equipment that you needed to manufacture a pot. I learned how to use it. And my final project, I had to design something and I had to build it and then I had to present it. And there was a 2 year program for engineering at our school too. The first 2 years, they never, they didn't do any drafting. They did no manufacturing. All they learned was theory. Me, on the other hand, I learned the drafting. I learned materials, what the materials were. I had to learn about materials, how materials acted. I had to learn about their properties. Then I had to learn how to use the machines and how to make it. And I can remember one of the engineering teachers who taught the program at the time, he said, you cannot be a designer or an engineer if you do not know how the machine works, if you do not know how it operates, what can it do, what it can't do. He said, it makes no sense. He says, we have all kinds of guys who come up with great ideas that cannot be made because there is no machine out there who can manufacture it. The material that they're deciding they're going to work with is not going to work because they don't understand how that material is going to react when it's manufactured and processed. And it was a really interesting conversation. But the funny thing is when I go into workshops, right? And I'm talking to, and when you're looking, I have students will say, my, I had, I went to the workshop and someone said, yeah, I've got kids that come in and don't know anything about CAD. They haven't been taught at the high school level. I don't have time to teach them. They should already know. So you've got a kid who's been in high academic classes their entire school history, who's never had a class like mine. And then they go to a college for a 4 year degree and they walk into a program where they have to use a CAD software to do their work and they don't know what to do.
yeah, It's
Again.
look, I think the education side of things, and if I go back to my very beginning, and without trying to get too political here, but just after, well, I guess in the 80s and the 90s, I mean, as I say, I was employed by one of our government departments at the railways, and during the 90s and obviously in the 2000s, our government sold off all our utilities. They sold off the railways, they sold off the electricity, they sold off all those works to private enterprise. What no, and that was from both sides of politics, not one or the other. It was based on money. What they forgot about was that each one of those government departments trained 1,000 apprentices, they trained 200 engineers, you know, and all those type training facilities that they had were gone because obviously private enterprise and private enterprise is there for a reason. It's
Mhm.
there to make money. Accept it. And
Now,
every business has to make money.
yep.
But someone has to take the responsibility
Hmm. To do
for
the,
the training.
yep.
Someone has to educate the people
Yep.
for these people. Now, good corporations, large corporations know that and they look after their employees and they have their own programs. Um,
But
but
smaller.
someone has to pick up the gap.
Yep.
Someone has to train the 200 engineers. Someone has to train the 1,000 apprentices to work on the factories.
Yep.
So, I mean, that's the other part of
Mhm.
going back to, the education to this younger age. The schools have to prepare students
For,
for the
for,
future, and there has to be programs. Now,
yeah.
admittedly, the STEM programs, I see a lot of good things. The first robotics, as I say, the Lego mine,
Yep.
all those things. You see it in university, the SAE, Barger systems. Well, all those have very good systems.
Yep.
Um, but there needs to be, and I mean, I see it in the aerospace. There's some wonderful things happening in
Mhm.
aerospace and bringing in people. Some of the in Australia, I think a worldwide program, the virtual astronaut program, where again a lot of this is all based on bringing in and then showing everybody what's available in regards to students to these type fields. But these are as I say, the sciences. These are still the aeronautics. Why isn't it general engineering? Where is general engineering in regards to and industrial design? Where are those courses in regards to opening up the eyes of students, or in regards to having people from those fields being able to say, "Hey, look, this is what your future is."
Mhm.
Everything has to be this inquiring mind. How is this made? Why do we build this? What happens if we don't build it? I think is the bigger question.
Yep.
So all these things I think have to somehow be incorporated to
Yep.
to open everyone's eyes to the fact that there are these skills which are needed, and drawing everybody into them.
And I think when we talk about engaging in STEM fields, I don't care. I don't care. It has to come, they have to be exposed. They have to have someone who's given them encouragement, who's shown them that this is a possibility, who turns on that light. Um, and I think there has to be, once that light has been turned on, once it's been turned on, there has to be other people along the way to keep that path lit. I think what happens is someone like me lights the path. And if they're fortunate, they go to a high school where there's somebody else who can keep that glowing, right? They go to university, and hopefully someone at a university or at a trade school keeps it going. And I think when you get involved in organizations like FIRST and SAE, and you get involved with Skills USA and all these different organizations, and those people who light those lights, who are involved in those organizations, who keep continually bringing that child into these different organizations and keep exposing them to people within the fields that they're interested in and keep exposing them to, yes, this is something that you can do, and keeps giving them other people that they can build off of, then you're going to see more success. I think what happens is unfortunately, we have a skills gap in teachers too. It's not just in the trade fields itself, it's in engineering itself, it's with the teachers. There are less of people who are trained to teach programs for engineering and tech now than there were, because in the 80s when I was starting, everybody has to go to college. Blue collar work is bad. You don't want to go there. So I was I was an industrial arts teacher. My job to get you ready to go into the workforce, to work in the trade area, to be, the next draftsman and designer, to be the next, machinist. That was the path, right? And then they start eliminating those programs. Well, you eliminate those programs, you lose teachers. You cut it so much that they cut teaching programs out of universities that teach those programs. So now you have to rely on bringing people in from outside, like we bring in retired engineers. We've had some that we've brought in and trained and brought them in a classroom. Some of them do wonderful because they're nurturing and they know they can work with children. But then you have some guys that come in, they're not team players. They weren't much of a team player where they were, and they're not much of a team player now. And then they put them in a classroom with kids. It's a recipe for disaster. So I think we not only have a gap with the skills, and we're not moving the needle with women and girls in the field, but we're also lacking the people who train. We're lacking the mentors who constantly keep it lit. And I think that's one of the big things. And when I talk to the girls who have gone on and are in the field or going that way, their biggest comment to me is that you made it seem possible.
Yeah, and
Made it
I think
seem
that's
possible. And I'm always their biggest cheerleader. I mean, if I feel it's not right for them, I might say, this is a good idea for you, but here's two other things. Look at these things, because it's what they're looking at. But if they shifted their scope just a little bit, it might be something that fits them better. But who am I to say it's going to fit them better? I can see their personality traits, and I can see what they like to do, and I can see how they struggle on some things and not on others. And some kids don't see that in themselves. So I could say, we have a conversation, but my goal is always trying to get the kids going that really want to go into engineering. They'll say, I really want to continue this. My goal is trying to get them to the right teacher after me.
I think that explains some of the why the growth has been so slow. There are still the gaps. There's a gap between that early education to the next, and again the whole mentorship. There's the if there's 1% now, and that 1% goes to 0.5%, and then so how do you get that 0.5% to then introduce it to others, so that growth? And I think that's just a perpetual problem it probably explains one of the reasons why you've seen such minimal growth over our working careers, because there hasn't been the educators in there hasn't been the mentors in there.
No.
um
Yeah,
and I
we
guess
have.
that's the task of how do we change that? Is it you know not going to be through our lifetime, but is it going to be in the lifetime of the female engineers of today? Are they the ones who have to you know pick up the torch,
Yeah,
light the flame? But
be that person. Yeah, be that person going back saying, hey, you could do this and go back. And it's really hard when you're first starting. I don't care who you are. It's very hard when you're first starting, and that profession that is what is your passion, that is makes up who you are. It gives you it is that thing that makes you happy. It gives you joy. um and I think when you don't have that mentor and you're in a job position where you feel unsure and unsteady, and it's taking and pulling that joy away from it and making it where you don't want to be there, that's when, if you don't have that mentor who can step in and say, hey, maybe this isn't the place for you to be. Maybe we need to look and see if we can find another place for you. Or maybe this is, oh, I dealt with this when I was starting out. These are some things that I found successful. Or let me see if I can find someone who can help you. I think we have to create a network of engineers, technicians, designers, all of these. We need to have a network of them, who are willing to stop and give back, um, to people in their community who might be struggling, who want to go down this path, but haven't had enough help to get there and stay there. And I think that's a big thing. I was talking to a parent today, and her daughter was a student of mine, and she's at the University of Florida studying engineering. And she has been trying to get into an apprenticeship program. And so far, she hasn't gotten into one. And she wants to get into an apprenticeship program for mechanical and working specifically mechanical engineering. I turned her into a mechanical engineering freak. I love it. Um,
Well
and
done.
she's great. Oh my God, she is so great. But she her mom was showing me her grades, and it's like A, B, A, and I'm like, what's this one? Man, was it manufacturing and design, something like that? I said, how could you get a B? She said she was doing good. She said, but and she really liked that class. She just didn't get enough time to get everything done that she needed to get done. But I'm like, okay. And I mean, and that's the industrial designing, and that's the the manufacturing, and looking at the your AirPod case, and how did they
Mm.
design this, and all the cute little bits and bobs and things, and that's, I think we have to make it, wow, you're really good at that. This is, and I think we as educators have to see that passion in kids and show them that this is a possibility.
Well, yeah, as I say, it's a career path. It's a future. There is so much, variety. There is so much scope for it. And as you say, if you sit in front of any desk and look around any object on your desk and the desk itself,
Yeah.
someone had to think about it. Someone had to design it. Someone had to engineer it. Someone had to manufacture it. And that goes for everything you basically can see within your eyesight.
Right.
And people have to realize and understand that, you know, is a good career and a good viable choice. And we also know that engineering is the most satisfying and rewarding career going around. That people don't realize that we who are in this industry are the most satisfied employees because, you know, the challenges and overcoming those challenges and then being able to, as I say, physically pick up a product at the end of that and say, that's me. Without
Mhm.
me, that hasn't been built.
And here's the thing, Mike. It hasn't. Think about it. I teach sixth, seventh, and eighth, which is what, 11, 12, 13. That great? I mean, think about it. They go in my class, they make something. I mean, it's the
Yeah,
coolest thing in the world. I made this. They take it home. I made this. I created this.
absolutely.
We have engineering hand, I it's and then the ones that create and actually build it and make it, and they've done all the work and they created it, all of a sudden it's like, wow, I could do this. I did this. I made this by myself. And it's like, oh, And those are the exciting things. And unfortunately, not enough of our students are exposed constantly to that joy of, oh, here's this little problem. How am I going to create a solution to this? And now I'm going to build it. Oh, I'm going to try it and it works. Or I tried it and it didn't work. Why didn't it work? And that's where me as the support system said, okay, why didn't it work? Let's look at it. What can we do to solve the problem you're having? And I think, again, when a kid gets frustrated and they can't find the solution, if they're not driven, okay, because there's that kid who will take apart the VCR, the toaster, whatever electronic device there is in the house, will strip it down to the bare wires to see how it works, and we'll put it back together and keep working it until they get it back together again. You've got those kids. That's that small pocket of, like, there's that small pocket. And then you've got the other ones who'll take it apart but can't quite figure out how to get it back together again. Then they get frustrated. Now, they're either going to have somebody in the background who's going to say, okay, let's sit down and work on it together and let's see what we could do in cooperation with each other to make it, fix it. Or you got the person in the background going, why did you do that? That's not what you were supposed to do. Don't ever do that again. And then you squash them and turn the light out. So we as generations and people as whole have to constantly help and show that there is an answer, that here, let's try this instead, or have you looked at it this way? I think we as engineers and people who teach kids that are going to become engineers, I think it's our ability to be able to look at things and say, what if you did this? Or what have you done? Or why do you think this hasn't worked? By constantly throwing questions back at them, to constantly re-engage their mind, to constantly show them different ways of doing things. And I think the best solution we have at getting that T and the E built up in STEM is to not just offer all these cool programs, after school programs, summer programs, but we need to develop the programs that are in the classroom from the get-go, from the minute they start into the classroom to all the way through school. They should have some exposure to it in every grade level, every year of their life. They should have some exposure to creative problem solving and coming up with a solution. And some places are doing really great at it. And that gets them into the pipeline. But then when we get them in that pipeline, now we have to create a structure of mentors and support systems to support those people who need that. When it gets dark, you need a beacon. And who's the beacons? Who
Yeah,
are
I think yeah, the answers seem reasonably simple. Uh,
yeah,
the process of doing that becomes the difficult part. But I think you're right. It has to be all through their schooling and all through their education, and there has to be someone to look at and look up to. And as I say, this maybe, well, certainly not my gender of my generation, but certainly, the genders of this generation now are there. Both, I think, young males and young females, need to
it's
be able to light that flame a little bit more in regards to, showing that there is those careers still, and they are viable, and they need to be, energized and enthused by being there and being seen.
yeah. And I think that's where I think, you said the other day, maybe we have to blow up the box.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
you think about it, we've been doing the same thing over and over and over again, and a we're not getting what we want from the T and E section. S&M, science, math, we're good, but the tech and engineering, that's not so good. So maybe we do have to stop, thinking, okay, what do we have to add to this? Or why aren't we making that? And maybe it is
What
time
we
to
have,
blow up the box.
well, yeah, what we have to do is that what we have to do is instead of waiting for them to come to us, we have to go to them. We have to create systems where we target people.
Yeah.
They do it in things like sports academies, especially in places like Australia, where we're a small population, but we like to play all the sports. So what they do, the institutions of the sporting institutions, they turn around and they invite people. They invite the young girls along, and they go, "Well, you're playing soccer," but they put them through a series of tests, and they say, "Hmm, you should show these strengths in these strengths, and you show this athleticism. You'd make a really good rower instead of a soccer player. You'd make a great rower. So here's a scholarship. We're going to take you to a sporting institute. You're going to do your education because we want you to be an Olympic rower." So they're targeting skills that maybe perhaps they didn't think they had. It works for sport because obviously, there's money and it's a growth industry.
But
But
here's
somewhere along the line, engineering has to turn around and say, if we want females to be engineers, well, as engineers, somehow we have to create these institutions. We have to create these environments, whether it be part of the school system or whether it be a certain division in regards to some type of tertiary education. We have to target the people, instead of the young female who shows wonderful skills in maths and may want to go on and do, say, economics and
right.
things like that. You've got to turn around and say, look, your math skills and your general skills, they relate really well to being someone who can, as a design, you might become a wonderful aeronautics engineer because you've got these wonderful maths and problem-solving skills. So instead of you doing economics, here's a scholarship. Here's a scholarship to go to university, and we want you to be an aeronautics engineer.
Mm.
And so you have to target people instead of you know, you have to target the people that you want who show those skills. Now, that's hard because one, it takes money,
It takes money and it
and
takes time.
two, it takes cooperation between government and industry.
Yeah.
And that's not always easy, but
That's not always
if you can get those to agree and the money is there, then I think it's the different approach. You
easy.
can't sit back and wait anymore. If we want female engineers, then instead of waiting for them to come to us,
We have to go
we
to
have
them.
to go to them.
Yeah. And we
It's
have to have go to them. We have to support, give them support systems, you know, and education. Kids that are struggling, we call it scaffolding. We add supports so they can meet
Yep.
a goal that everybody else is meeting. And I think sometimes, we need that. I really don't know why I managed to survive, other than the fact that I am, you know, strong-headed, opinionated, um, and I grew up in a family where quit wasn't an option, um, and I wasn't gonna have somebody tell me no, you can't do that. Um, you know, I couldn't get my foot in the door as a designer, which broke my heart because that I really wanted to be a machine designist. I really wanted to work under mechanical engineers, taking their doodles and creating an actual working drawing that could be, that was my passion. It was art. It was art in a very technical form, and it was math that I could manage because I wasn't responsible for the heavy math. Um, and I loved it and I excelled at it. But everywhere I went, it was like, 1980, what was it? I graduated 85. And it was like, oh no, 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 no. We've got 30 men down there in the drafting room, and they're all married. What is this cute little 20, 21-year old? I wasn't even, I was 20, what do what kind of, destruction and, what kind of path of destruction will you cause? And I think, they were, trying to protect that, that whole thing. And even my first teaching job, I taught, I was trained, my minor was in graphics, and because I love graphics, I still do. Um, but and then I course drafting, so it was drafting with the graphics, and then I had to teach auto shop, and I had to be able to teach small engine repair, and I had to do construction. So I've learned how to do all of those things, right? Because as an industrial arts teacher, you're supposed to be able to teach all of it, but my heart was drafting and graphics. That's what I wanted to teach. But no one told me that your first year is teaching, that's not what you're going to get. um, and I took a job a month after school started. I took a job teaching at a high school in Massachusetts. And I was the very first female industrial arts teacher they had ever hired. I was the very first. It was a month into the school year, and they hired me to teach small engine repair and auto shop.
Well, see, you have to
And
realize that maybe not the career that you wanted, but the career that
no,
you've had has been
no,
has been an influence on others. And I think
yeah. And I just kind of went, I go, okay, I says, I really don't. And oh, you'll be fine. You'll be fine. And I'm like, I don't think so. Um, and it was absolutely horrendous. I found out later that I definitely was a diversity hire. Yes, I was a diversity hire because they needed a diversity. I mean, and all of the Black applicants and all of the other applicants that applied that were male, none of them had the credentials and the certification that they needed. Where here I am, I had all they needed. So, when they say you're young and dumb, wet behind the ears, in your 20s, in 20 minutes, after 20 minutes into an interview, if they're offering you a job, you might want to turn around and leave, walk out of the room, alarm,
yeah,
alarm bells
that's
should have been ringing in the back of my ear. Why do they want you so bad a month in, month after school starts and 20 minutes in, knowing you don't have what you need, but still offer you a job? There is
yeah, but that's the advantage of being young. You don't have to know everything,
no.
and
And I
and
would,
sometimes diving in doesn't
oh,
hurt.
I full bore in. I mean, cry all the way home, figuring out what the heck I was going to do the next day, reading textbooks, figuring out how I was going to do it. And the biggest problem with me is my male counterparts did not help me. They didn't want me there. I did not belong there. Um, I was in a very hostile. I was in a very hostile work environment. Um, Not because of who I was. It was that I was a woman, and that wasn't a place for me to be. That wasn't where you should be. So for me, going up against that, I made it through. I worked at that school for 2 years. Unfortunately, again, I lost the job because they cut the program because they had to cut money, and that program was the first one that they cut. And I went on and did more teaching in other places, but even then, because I couldn't keep my foot in the door because they kept closing programs because, oh, we're not going to offer that program anymore. We're going to offer more, college courses, and we're not going to offer this course. So at some point I said I had enough, and I walked away, and I left teaching for 8 years, walked completely away from it. Um, Went into the printing industry and worked in the printing industry for 8 years. Learned everything from driving forklifts to loading presses, and learned how to run, saddle stitchers and bomb folders and all kinds of other good stuff. And I worked my butt off for 8 years, and I loved every minute working. It was hard work, but it was a job. It was in a field that I really loved. It was something I had studied in college, and now I was practically applying it. When I went back into the classroom, all of those skills that I learned were things that I could bring back into the classroom, and work with my students. So was it a long way around to go back into what in the end my true passion is teaching and working with young minds and helping them find a path of success no matter what they decide to do. um yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
that
as
was
I say,
great.
it's all
it,
experience.
yeah, and I broke ground for women
Yeah.
in the field, in tech ed, in industrial arts, teaching it. All of a sudden, yes, I was the only woman in the room for a long time, but now when I look at in the room, there's more women in the room. There still isn't enough, but there's more. And that's and the thing is now that I'm the old dog in the room and I see all the young guys coming in and I sit in the back